We're gonna take people to hell today?
Are we recording?
Yeah.
Well, kind of, but their own personal hell that they already are supporting, creating, and obviously suffering, because
How
people
is it?
are suffering.
How is it that they create their own hell?
Uh, I would love to get into that. Would you hold that question?
Mm-hmm.
But I just wanted to say a couple of things. First of all, here we are in your workplace where you train how many different people? 32 different people at
Something like that.
something like that. And when you and I used to do martial arts in the old dojo over in Johnston, I dubbed that place the House of Pain because there were broken bones and torn tendons and, you know, maybe some concussions and stuff like that. This place could easily be known as the House of Strain, wouldn't you?
Mhm.
How about if you just accept that, okay? That's my gift to you for today.
Got it.
And that's the most lighthearted I'm going to be at this point. You were talking about this earlier, I was talking about it, and we decided that we might do something about depression.
Mm-hmm.
There are various levels of it, you could say. And what the barometer would be the individual's intensity of suffering. Because you can't know how much a person's suffering. It's as if we're all burning up inside, we're all on fire. The Buddha said it. We're all empty, Sakra said it, and the Buddha said the same. We're all empty, but we're on fire. And thus we need something all the time. We're always reaching and grasping. Fire is desire itself. So it's a lack, as Sakra said. When you're empty, you're perfect, your consciousness is perfectly empty and it just goes from one thing to another. It's always in need, it's inexorable in its movement, its desire, its demand. You know, if some person has ever said to you, I'll never ask you for another thing, and then, you know, you couldn't count the askings after that. As a human condition, we are such I don't think we're so frail. I think we take a lot. We can withstand a lot of the stress. Animals would die right away with the stress that we have, that we feel. Some animals do. They're tortured and treated like they deserve to be harmed all the time. Animals, dogs tied up and murdered and things like that. But these little creatures, they don't know they're gonna die. They know fear, but they don't know about their death. What they could endure as a shock of what we endure would probably stop many of them, just cause them. You know why I say that? Many years ago, I went down to the Serpentarium in Florida, along the Keys, and I saw Mr. Haas milk a king cobra. I think he milked 2 that Sunday afternoon. And then the story behind all that was when he was bitten by a king cobra. Now a king cobra, you know, maybe a 14-foot king cobra, the bite could kill, I think they said something like 200 people. Now, he had been bitten the week before by a viper, and he had to go to the hospital, his heart was pounding, but he had been taking anti-venom shots for years, otherwise he would have croaked. Anyway, there he is, a week later he's back working, and he's gonna milk a king cobra. That's a big fish, a big snake. And it immediately starts to run away from the cage. And he taps it on the tail, pardon my joke, but he taps it on the back, the uttermost part. The whole thing is a tail. And he taps it, and it immediately comes back and goes right at his throat. And then he puts up that little hooked piece of metal, like that, and he stops it. And he's doing this with the snake. And this Sunday, after he was bitten, his hand was weak, and so when he grabbed the cobra from behind, because he will fiddle around with it, mesmerize it with the metal, and then go around and grab it from behind. Yeah, that I couldn't do that. Could you do that? Would you want to do that for a living? He's been bitten many times too. So anyway, the cobra is so strong and his hand is so weak from the injury, it turned on him and it put a fang into him. So he took a lot of cobra venom. And of course he nearly died. He was probably blind for a week. He went through a couple of... what he did at that point, if I remember the story correctly, people can check on this, this Coral Gables Serpentarium. Anyway, he did bring the cobra back to the cage and throw it back into its cage in the back of the Serpentarium. And then, he went to the hospital, nearly died, stayed crushed physically for, I don't remember how long. A couple of weeks later, though, he's back. And every time the cobra saw him, it tried to attack him. Usually they'll leave you alone, but this is an unfinished business. It was as if the cobra suffered a kind of neurosis, and I can explain that in a different way that makes it sound much more acceptable to a scientific point of view. But what was happening was a certain pattern in the brain was being disrupted. The pattern was, I bite, it dies. This didn't die. There's a loop, and the animal tried to finish the thing and could never get it done again. And it's just ate the animal up, and it caused some kind of severe thing because you know what? Shortly after that, it died. It just died. It died of depression. I don't care what silly psychoanalytic term you apply to it, but it died because it failed to kill Hast. And what that means to me, neurophysiological processes. Okay, so now that we've established that, at that level, we are not different. I'm understanding more and more as I get older that there's a kind of strong destiny that is extremely difficult to overcome as a result of the imprints of an early life, in combination with one's DNA, et cetera, but what that person is going to be is shot out by an arrow. Gibran said, your children are like arrows, you've got to let them go. Well, here's another analogy with the arrow too. And once that thing is in flight, what are you going to deter its path with? You're going to use your mind, your understanding, because you can't do it if you're unconscious, right? You'll just be a machinery. You'll be something that just runs. Am I correct? If we think in terms of us being, real individuals, real people, real spiritual, however high we want to perceive ourselves, we want to have a sense of self-esteem in all of this. So we want to maintain that we have some kind of control in our lives. Otherwise you walk around, you're like half dead. So you're trying to maintain your control by doing certain things, like lifting weights and accomplishing, going through strain and pain and all that. You do all that. But there's still a destiny that you do not see so completely because it's running through your brain so fast. It's like the arrow that's flying across the path of your sight. And that destiny came out of your early conditioning. I like to use the metaphor. It's like you're a beautifully sculptured piece of soft wax when you're young. And as you get older, the wax hardens slowly. And you're suspended in space, so you're not distorted by the space. But whatever happens to you, whatever comes to you, has an effect on you. Good and bad. It's not just one thing. Not all conditioning is bad, but we live in a world full of contradictions. We know that. I mean, it's just, we don't have to go into detail about that. The wild side of the human being. You know, I tried to present it that way in my Narcissus and the Vampire Myth, when I made those people on that gigantic island, on that other world. I made them civilized in the sense that they would dress up and go to work. They would abide by certain laws. Not all of them, lots of criminals, very violent, very tribally violent people. And it wouldn't take a great deal to bring them back to the primitive state where they were murdering each other in the forests, tribes against tribes, 10 tribes. So that's the way people are. I mean, it's always been this. Take a look around you. If you don't believe this, there are people who don't believe this. There are people, a doctor friend of mine would always say, the world is getting better. And the people at my dinner table all would want to jump across the table and strangle him because he wasn't paying attention to all the horrors of the world. His portfolio was getting better. There's such a sense of self-interest in so many perceptions and thoughts, conclusions, and feelings. And the feelings are the ones that really are the fuel for the engine. You've got an engine that's been constructed. It's an imprint. It's almost like a physical imprint in the brain. It causes certain patterns of thought. They go in certain directions all the time, and they are the result of all this other stuff. But there's more to it. There's even more than just the imprint. There's you observing everything and watching the whole thing arise and fall. That's the only place where you can claim any kind of self-control, or self-knowledge, or free will, or anything like that. And thus, when an individual finds the world in all of its discomforts and disappointments, where it hurts and discourages, it breaks the heart so many times. People go through terrible emotional conditions. Have you ever been in love and had your heart broken? Did you? Oh, you're so unusual. I remember when you were a kid and I said, it's going to happen to you. You said, thanks a lot, as if I were going to produce it. No, John, it's just waiting for you. It's just waiting for everybody. And then there are people, you handle with strength. There are people who are crushed. They feel, their whole lives are changed, the direction of their lives. Some people are like failed romantics. They want that one person. They fail. And then I got this out of a movie, and then they become promiscuous. And that does happen. Men and women. You become disappointed, and thus you just substitute, and you know it. There's no more love. There's just function, use, and it's lonely. And that's at the base of all depression. There's a sense of loneliness where there's no help, and you can't get out of the pit. That's how that feels for lots of people. They can call it a pit. It's down in a place where some people have told me they try to expel all their breath and never take another breath, like the child. I'm never going to breathe again, I'm going to die. And they try, because they're that so deeply in despair. And the despair is underlaid by a sense of loneliness. It's always going to come back down to relationship. It was promulgated by relationship in the face of the need for relationship of the child. Then the relationship produces something other than the comforts the child is always seeking. The relationship may be made out of spikes. It could be a walking porcupine in your life. And relationship can be that too. And then guess what kind of relationship you have later on in life. People just neglect this. I don't mean to pick on either gender either. People just neglect it. And the only people, in my opinion, who should want to even hear any of this and even engage me in a conversation about it would be the kind of person who's intrepid enough to look within. The Moody Blues said in one of their beautiful songs, you've got to make the journey out and in. They were speaking of the same thing I've been talking about for decades. It's the Zen, esoteric Christian, Hindu, perennial attempt at self-knowledge. You got to look inside while you're in relationship with the exterior, with the conditions, the people of the world. But you've got to see what's going on. Otherwise, if you don't, you're going to just be an automatic monkey responding. We could give all kinds of examples. I don't know if you want to, but I remember being at the nursing home once, sitting, taking a break, while my mother was being attended to by the CNAs. In her dying days, I was there all the time for her, as I promised. And I was sitting out on a veranda there, and there was a guy coming in to the nursing home, and he was talking to somebody else who was out of my vision. And I just found it remarkable that he had to explain, to a complete stranger, he was explaining his whole life. I recognize that personality. I don't disdain him or anything like that. But I just saw the weakness. What was the weakness? The need to be in a relationship and to share. I mean, he was sharing his life with these people. Just met them. As he's walking through, they said something to him. Before you know, he's got 10 minutes standing out there explaining stuff. He's going to see somebody he cares about, too. So you see this as a wounded, soft heart. You could see it. I mean, you can look at yourself in so many different ways. The first thing to do is to just be honest. Join my authenticity club. I want to make one before I die. A loose confederation of people who just don't want to bullshit themselves or be bullshitted by anybody. I know a guy who never does anything unless his own self-interest is first, last, and foremost. And yet he'll try to say he's doing that thing. He's going to your property and cutting a swath through your property because he's making a trail for you. No, he wants to bring wood down through there. But he's trying, and he insults your intelligence along with all of his other lies about being a Vietnam vet and a war hero, never was there. He's also dubbed by me as the king of broken promises. I have never seen anybody capable of breaking 101 out of 100 promises. I've never seen that miracle before. But the hell with Pythagoras, this guy can do that. So the world is full of craziness and good reason to be depressed because you have no idea about what the truth is. You think, you hear from the religions and the sages, the mystics and all this and that, but all you know is that you're profoundly attached to this bodily life. And you can say you believe in God and all this and that. Well, the people who believe in God, what's the very first thing they start thinking of in the morning? Are they thinking about God, or are they just trying to get the hell out of bed and get moving? I mean, maybe they can have the idea of God in their mind, but again, it's just a thought. It's not a realization. It's like a flimsy hope that takes a habit, and maybe that's the best we can do. But we're trapped in this world. I mean, accept that fact. I call it sometimes like a dream from which we cannot awaken, and it's an intertwining dream, because people don't see each other for what we are. I mean, we're made out of energy, but we see forms that are so culturally evaluated that we can see one person who may be a great and glorious soul as ugly and repulsive, and another person who is profoundly repulsive in terms of selfishness and lack of care for others. If we can see that person as beautiful or handsome, And we can make that person into a very wealthy individual, a movie actor, or even a greater job of acting, a politician. Sorry. So the world, but I come back to it all converges back upon the existential self. And the existential self is going to experience a profound confrontation if he or she is a thinking, feeling person who goes through all the heartbreak, the disappointments of life, the little ones, the big ones. And yes, a great deal of joy in between. As long as you have energy, you can handle it. You get older and you don't have the energy to handle it. That's why you get a lot of older people committing suicide. You don't hear about it, though. I think that they don't really want to discourage it. You know, get you off the rolls. You can still vote. Yeah, that used to happen all the time in Chicago. Mayor Daley he'd always got a very large percentage of the cemetery. I'm not joking. The world, the more you know about the world, the more you realize how immensely corrupt it is and how self-serving it is. At every level, if you think that a government is going to be moral, what childhood fantasy is that? Big power politics has no morality. Anybody knows that. So, as I said, we could do a dip into hell, but I would much rather, have a conversation about this with people. All kinds of things can happen in a dialogue that I can't make happen alone. So.
Well, I was just going to say, or ask a question rather. If we were to define God as the description of all of existence, occurring, everything everywhere, all at once, all happiness and suffering and discouragement and encouragement and positive and negative is all of existence. And we experience it. And our relation to that experience, I suppose, is the exercise of existence.
Right. That's the purpose, I think. I don't usually even put purpose out as a definition, as you just did. But, right, I'm at the point where I'm just trying to get people to recognize what is the purpose for your life. Instead of my telling them, because I think the purpose of this place for me is to transcend it. I really don't like it.
I think an essential step in transcending it is anti-bullshit, which I think is the core of this channel on YouTube. The authenticity that you mentioned seems to be one of the first gateways that one would have to pass through to raise their existence to a better level.
Well, that's a compliment, then. Thank you. I hope that that's what people see. I mean, I know that there are guys who are greater scholars than I am, but I don't really know anybody who lives on the bottom of the ocean any deeper than I do. Because I eventually go back to the void, because that's where I look for the real soul. I mean,
it's an interesting thing to contemplate non-existence so often while living in existing.
You can't really do it.
Right.
You cannot conceive of yourself. You cannot conceive of a moment when you do not exist.
Right.
I can. I know that's okay. I'm sorry. We should include this nutsiness, okay? But I will share something that was like a gift to me, and I'm going to explain it thoroughly. And I've mentioned this before. I know I put it on in various places. Certainly I put it in my books. It was something that I began to experience as a child, very young child, but enough to be self-aware. I mean, I was aware of myself to some extent as a baby, not a baby, a toddler, I'd say. But at a certain point, I was having trouble sleeping for reasons I could explain. And so sometimes I would lie there without sleeping, but I'd be in a different state. Sometimes it would not be a good state, but sometimes it would be a very tranquil state too. And I think what happened, it began to happen, and it happened regularly for a number of months, years. I think part of the brain would shut down because I was really resting. It was kind of like in a deep meditative state. And that part of the brain that I understand that probably shut down is known as the reticular activating system. And that's where you get the sense of time and space. So there I am, still awake, relaxed, but awake. And now my sense of time and space disappeared. Well, what that means is that my entire materiality disappeared. Because that's what materiality is made of, dimension. So I was no longer a material being, but I was still awake, no joke. And so what did I experience? Well, there was no me to experience it. There was no me. I was no longer that kid or anything. What I was a consciousness, simple, singular consciousness, unmoving, in the midst of pure nothingness. And I was made out of the same nothingness, but I was awake. And I did experience an emotion, wonder. And I had always been there. I knew I had always been there. And the way I used to come out of that, often, I mean, maybe I fell asleep at some times, but other times I would come out of that where, okay, now I'm pure nothingness. And then suddenly, it's as if I have hands, and the hands are pressed, two hands pressed against something extremely smooth. So smooth, it felt like nothing, like this. And then I realized that it was moving, and it was moving past my hands at an incredible rate of speed, and it was intensifying the speed in quantum leaps every second. So it was quite amazing. My hands, I'd have hands, and then it was my face, and then it was my whole body, and then I would come out of it, and I would come back out. Isn't that interesting, huh? For a little while, the reticular activating system showed me something essential about my essential self, that I am just a consciousness. And it taught me, that's my soul. I'm not claiming it's immortal, but I wouldn't be afraid to go back to that. Yes, the body would be afraid to go back to that. The body will fight that. That's death. That's what people call death. But it's also pure freedom. That's what the Buddha was talking about. Only his pure nothingness is made out of pure light.
The ego would fight it.
The ego would fight it. It's like the ego would fight the ego being a water bubble flying into the sun.
The essence of the ego is outside of the present.
Well, that's a good way I wouldn't call that the essence.
No.
I would call the essence separateness.
Okay.
But yeah, you're absolutely
Projection.
right. That's what.
Ideological projection.
That's part of the concatenation. That's part of the flow, or the like one thing would fall and then another would fall.
Yeah.
So you get down. But essentially there is this sense of isolation, separation, and loneliness in the Satrian ego.
One thing that I have been thinking about for months now is the premise of choice, the nature of experiencing decision making and outcome, as we started the conversation, and how there's not much difference between making a decision to do something and experiencing doing it. And the suffering and anxiety about making an incorrect decision based on a perfectionistic outcome is exponential. The suffering can just go on forever. Being able to let go of that idealistic perspective on the outcome and just continue to perform in the moment is not only like a feeling of release, but seems to unbind the mind from the projection into the future. It's something that I've just been repeating a lot in my mind as I experience myself going through different obstacles, struggles, and occurrences, like things that will just pop up. But the solution for me has been to eliminate my projection of the outcome, completely eliminate it, and completely just go back to the moment.
That's a great way to approach it.
The exercise that I was doing to do that was the breathing exercise that made me lose consciousness. Right?
Really?
And that's the key, though, for me. I believe the part of my brain that causes the anxiety is the over-analytical part, or something that I experience quite often. And so if I go into a meditative exercise that keeps me present, like a breathing exercise, because that's supposedly the gateway. The breath is the gateway. And then follow that up with what you had mentioned, which is the exhalation until one cannot make a decision to be and has to take a breath in and exist again, because the body will just take over, right? After you lose consciousness, the body will just make you inhale so that you continue to exist. It's like a reset. It's like a resurrection, a rebirth experience. And you go deeper and deeper into it. It's an incredible experience. It completely loses, for those that I've worked with in here, that experience stress to no end, that have chosen the 9-to-5 life, that work the office job and project so far into the future that they plan for every single thing that could happen.
So let me understand this. You've been doing breathing exercises with people here? You've been helping them?
Yes.
Could I suggest a direction?
Of course.
I don't know what you would want to do with this, but, I've been rebirthed. I was rebirthed 4 times by a woman. I did it 2 or 3 times for myself, all by myself.
How long did that take?
They would usually be probably 45 minutes to an hour of fire breathing. Well, I call it fire breathing. You're like panting like a dog.
Mm-hmm.
That's basically what you do. And the person who is your guide is going to keep you in the breath. Because if you do it alone, you're going to stop.
Right. I found that as well.
Yeah. So you need somebody to keep you.
You lose sight. You lose.
Yeah, you just
everything.
Everything just, and you
Float.
float. And I
Right.
had extraordinary
Right.
experiences there. I saw things that people wouldn't see on psychedelics.
Right.
I'm not subject to hallucinations, but I'm lying there all alone in the bed. It's quiet, it's dark, I've got everything shut down, everything's clean. So, and this is years and years ago, and I don't want to talk about what I saw, but it was quite extraordinary. And it was more, it's what you call an anagogic vision, and it's more palpable, solid, it's more vivid, alive than this. And there are reasons for that, because you're not seeing it with these eyes, you're seeing it with the third eye, and that one doesn't go off.
Right.
This is on, off, so we don't see
Right.
it. That doesn't go off, and it's quite extraordinary, because it's rich beyond your wildest vision. They can't, Disney couldn't make it richer.
Right.
So, if you called it rebirthing and you had a place for people to lie where it would be warm and comfortable, you have to make it so it's warm, and you have to have a blanket over them, and you do that, you keep them in the breath. And they should do it pretty much on an empty stomach.
Right.
You could do that in here, tell some, rebirthing, you'd have to get somebody to do it for you too.
There's,
You want to be rebirthed so that you know what they're dealing with.
sure. I think it's an interesting experience either way, even if it doesn't have any other effect other than just experiencing it.
I can guarantee it'll have some kind of an effect. I can tell you about what it did for me.
Even the limited version seemed to be calming for a lot of people.
Right. Well, if it does bring you back to a state that's more primary, infantile, you could say, it's as if you were just born. And what I felt was gratitude towards this woman who was really cold and distant. And at that time, too, one thing she was doing was, while I was being rebirthed, she was playing a recording of Turiya Sings. You don't know Turiya. It's a chanting by Turiya Yama. I think that's her full name. She was John Coltrane's wife, black woman. John Coltrane died young, but he was considered the greatest hornman in the world. And his stuff was all soul. Great soul. He was a real spiritual guy, but he died young. And she was with him, but they were sharing that value of, it's like a high Hindu, extreme asceticism. And she went and she became Turiya Yama. She went to practice for years under high austere discipline, truly austere discipline. And when I didn't know who she was. I had never heard her or of her, and all I heard was the voice. I thought it was maybe an Indian man because it sounded like Krishnamurti's voice. That low, guttural, a kind of a guttural sound, and she's chanting. And what I know, okay, I'm being rebirthed, so my mental energy is almost psychedelic. And so this is a projection, which would be fine as far as I'm concerned. But it sounded to me like that voice, which was obviously singing to God, that voice, between that voice and God, there was no distance. That's the sense I had from it. I know, okay, it sounds fruity. Okay, I'm fruity. But that's what I sensed. And then I found out who she was. I think she is if you can say she's a God person, she's filled with that spirit, that desire, that love of it. You know what I mean? And a much higher version of it. Not like Santa Claus. It's not like the Big Daddy comes riding in on John Wayne's horse. It's way more subtle than that. Anyway, that's a brief description. Gratitude and a realization that there was something really going on between that voice and what that voice was singing to. It was amazing. So it was beautifully liberating, and I had 4 of those, and each time there was something very nice. So you may want to do it. You may want to offer it. I think you could do it as well as anybody, because I've seen people do it. And I've done it for a couple of people. Yeah. You may want to consider it. It's just picture an hour.
Mm-hmm.
And then let the person cry or do whatever, you know.
That's been an experience too.
Breathing? Oh, yeah.
Heard that a few times now.
Yeah, well.
Quote, I don't want to do that because I cry.
Okay, what I suggest to you, my help for that is simply buy yourself a large packet of tissues. That's the only thing I can offer.
So,
all right, we're going to finish this.
to wrap up, you had mentioned Krishnamurti, And so I guess this is a good time to mention it. Krishnamurti's, the basis of his work was moving meditation.
Yeah, you can put it that way. Being awake all the time to yourself. Like Socrates said it, the unexamined life is not worth living. You don't examine your life. Listen, I want to say one last thing. People have this great love for the idea of reincarnation. Even the Gurdjieff work is dedicated to trying to spiritualize the ego so that it has a chance of evolving to the point above one world above the other, to the point where it can become liberated, because right now we're so far away from it. Interesting thought. But what's behind all this is something that's unsaid. In the Gurdjieff work, it's thought that you just disappear if you don't establish a central self. And you do that by being awake to yourself, or as he called it, remembering yourself. Like now, you remember yourself. What I'm remembering myself in this. I'm this and seeing this. Okay, it's as simple as that. But people get lost in this. And so the whole Gurdjieff work was to try to establish this more spiritualized sense of self as the witness. Basically what the Zen, it's traditional, it's thousands of years old, it's perennial philosophy in psychology. So there's that, but here's what's not spoken. How about if some of the people are right? Suppose there is such a thing as reincarnation, which means that you come back and come back and come back and come back and come back until you learn not to come back. The whole point of Buddhism is not to come back. Do people know that? Do people realize that? The whole thing is to get off the wheel of life and to go into nirvana. The bodhisattva will stay here. Even though he's liberated, he'll stay to help people out. And he'll stay and suffer in this world of samsara. But he'll be here for them.
He chose to come back, right?
He chooses somehow to come back to help. That's the compassionate Buddha. And so the whole point, if you're ego-bound, you're really stuck. Oh, you're going to be a bad girl? Well, ego-bound. You want to go bite somebody? You chased him away again. Oh, was that good, John?
Yeah.
We did it.
So,
How much was that? 40, 45?
43 minutes so far. So, in closing for you guys,
Oh, I
because this is
didn't
an uncut, unedited video, give this video a like and subscribe to the podcast, to the video log that we got, and leave us some comments below so that we can turn it into a conversation. We were talking about getting a group together, an authenticity group. And so anybody that's interested in that, please comment or email us at shadowworks.philosophy
philosophy
at gmail.com.
.com.
Thanks.